There are 154 national forests in this great country that I call home. 151 of these forests are located within the continental United States, and my goal is to visit each one over the next few years. Hi, friend. I know there are hundreds of thousands of videos on YouTube that you could be watching right now, so the fact that you chose to watch this one, seriously, thank you. This video has been a hard one for me to do for a few reasons. I had big plans to go on a major adventure, one that I've been wanting to do for years, but just have not had the opportunity or finances to do so. My plan was to convert the back of my brand new 2021 Jeep Renegade into a mini camper of sorts and hit the road. Just me and my cat Nugget. I began work on the Jeep nearly 3 years after purchasing it. Sometime in the future I'll go over the details of the whole build, but I started by removing the back seats. That turned into a harder than expected task. I finally got them out and began taking measurements of the newly opened space for the build. Initially I designed it to accommodate a cat more than a person. I tried to make a space for a litter box and a separate space for Nugget's food and water, while still trying to have space for myself. I used very cheap sheets of MDF for the deck and 2x4s for the frame. It was very ugly, but somewhat functional. I had to build quick because the heart of winter was fast approaching and I needed to get on the road to Florida. On our first trip together, Nugget curled up in the passenger seat and was asleep before we even got out of the city. She slept most of the entire trip, only waking up to eat, drink, or stink up the Jeep by using her litter box. We made our first overnight stop in Hoosier National Forest. It quickly became evident that the design I had done was just not going to work. I expected it to be very close quarters, with only about 15 square feet of space to work with. I had bought a rooftop luggage carrier prior to leaving, but ran out of time to mount it. I did that while stopped at Hoosier National Forest. Doing this allowed me to move all the luggage to the roof, and this really helped free up some of the very limited space we had. By the time we reached Florida, I knew that a major redesign was in order. See, I have an engineer's brain, and one problem we engineers have is to over-engineer things. We call this feature creep. I kept adding things to the design plans and trying to give myself more space and comforts, and in a very short order it became way too extravagant and expensive to actually build. After tinkering around with different materials such as PVC pipe and particle board to maximize the space while keeping the weight and cost down, I gave up and went back to the beginning. I stopped and asked myself, what is the bare minimum needed to be both comfortable and functional? That was a place to sleep and work while on the road, and a space for Nugget's needs. I designed the first version to be non-permanent so that I could remove it and put the seats back in if needed. I wanted this next design to be the same. Time and weather were against me this time too, as I only had a week before I had to be back in Indiana for work. Most of that week it rained and left me with really only 2 days to work on it. This build worked out much better, albeit still very tight. Getting in and out was not smooth, but it was doable. It was not perfect, and being that I did this build in a hurry as well, I knew that I would probably end up redoing it again. My main concern was making sure Nugget was well accommodated. I talked about how Nugget and I came to be in a previous video, but that was some time ago, so for those of you who don't know, a dear friend of mine who is highly allergic to cats called me one evening asking for my help. She had found a stray kitten that was very near death. She loves animals and just cannot bear the thought of this poor kitten suffering as she was. I quickly went over and saw just how bad the cat was. She was so thin you could see her ribs and spine. Her paws were cracked and bloody from walking on hot asphalt and concrete. She could hardly meow. It would just come out as a crackly whisper. My heart fell in love with that poor thing, But since my daughters already had a cat and a dog in the house, I was not keen on adding another pet to our tiny 900 square foot home. I brought her home to nurse her back to health, and by day 2, she was my cat. She stole my heart. She quickly healed and was like my shadow from day 1. She would greet me at the door every day when I got home from work, meowing at me with her sweet, scratchy voice that never really healed or changed. As soon as I would lay down in bed, she would jump up in the bed with me and lay right on my chest, as close to my chin as she could get, and fall fast asleep. This part is why it's taken me a while to do this video. Nugget got sick a few months ago and passed over the Rainbow Bridge. It's taken me until now to really talk about her without crying. I loved my little Nugget. I finally got back to the build and completely redesigned it. Again. I don't have Nugget anymore, so that space in the Jeep has been repurposed, but the space in my heart that she held is still feeling empty. I'll still take her memory with me in my travels. I'll be hitting the road again soon, and I have big plans. There are 154 national forests in this great country that I call home, the United States of America. These national forests are some of the most beautiful and peaceful places one could go. 151 of these forests are located within the continental United States, and my goal is to visit each one over the next few years. I will be spending at least a week in each one, and I want to really explore it as much as I can. I want to give everyone a taste of what the forest life has to offer. I'm currently on a search for peace and spiritual respite, both of which I find while in the forest. I hope you will follow my journey that I call this two-spirit life.